right, Erica, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome all fabric enthusiasts. Thank you so much for joining us this beautiful Saturday afternoon. I know for many of us, the weather's nice and we're probably out surfing, and we'll catch this video later. But I'm so excited to be joined today by Erica Jackman. Erica is the June Cotton Cuts featured designer of the month. She has been creating quilts for a long time, and we'll get into her story. But we loved Erica's work so much that we featured it in our classic and our modern maker shipments for the month of June, and are excited to have a conversation with her today to learn what she does, how she got here. We were chatting beforehand about her children and all the craziness that life ensues as well. And so I can't wait to hear how she's able to balance all of it and keep everything together to produce such artistry in motion. So Erica, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So my very first question that I ask is just tell us about yourself. Tell us about you, what makes you special, what makes you sparkle.
Okay, so I am a mom. I have 3 kids. They're 6, 11, and 13. They all just had birthdays. So we live in Salem, Oregon. We've lived here for about almost 5 years, and we came here from Southern California. We lived in LA and then San Diego for about a decade between those two. And originally I'm from Texas. So I always claim that, and I know everybody from Texas, loves to talk about that, but I am like a 6th generation Texan. So I'm like a real Texan.
Now, which part of Texas? Because I know there's regional differences.
Yeah, northeastern. So way out in the middle of nowhere, little town called Pittsburgh. It's a small town. So
okay.
But I lived there for a long time, and I no longer have an accent. So most of the time, at least. So I started quilting when I was pregnant with my 2nd child. So a little over 11 years ago. And at the time, my husband had finished law school, and he was working at a big law firm, and he was working like all the time, 80 hours a week. And when he wasn't working, he was asleep. So I was home with a 2-year-old. I was bored, and I just said, I want to get this sewing machine, and I just want to make a few baby type things. I'm not interested in quilting because my mother-in-law is a quilter, and my husband has some traumatic memories of being made to go to the fabric store as a child. And so he was a little nervous. And, no one in my family sews. And I just thought, this is a practical skill that I could learn to do some basic stuff. So, of course, within a month of getting my sewing machine, I made my first quilt because, I don't know. From then I was hooked. So I just kept making quilts, and I really appreciate the balance between the technical math side of quilting and the creative side. I feel like that fits my personality really well. And I would have never have ever guessed that I would end up loving quilting, because it was so not what I thought that I would like, and I love it. So I think that has really informed my whole approach to quilting and writing patterns, is that I feel like there's a place for everybody in quilting, and everyone could love quilting, and you just kind of have to find what works for you. So a lot of what I try to do with my patterns and with things that I share on social media is about trying to make quilting accessible to as many people as possible, because it can seem a little intimidating. There's all these terms that you don't know, and there are all these steps, and it can seem kind of scary, but I think everybody can do it. And, you just have to find a method that works for you, and you have to kind of get over that fear of trying something new. And so that's how I try to move forward. And with my patterns, I will never write a pattern that includes skills that I don't enjoy doing, because I want to enjoy making my own pattern. So I don't have Y seams in any of my patterns. I rarely do curves, and when they do, they're very gentle. And so I try to make patterns that people will enjoy making, but also if you started in the beginner patterns and you worked towards the more intermediate patterns, you would gain a lot of skills in the process. So that's kind of I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, no, that was absolutely fantastic. So I am always surprised by how much quilting is math and geometry. And so I'm an engineer. I love the math. I love the geometry. I love how a lot of quilting is symmetric, right?
Yeah.
It feels like you're balancing equations at the end, and I know a lot of people when they think of quilting, they think it's like old person, but to me, I think of it's more like textile engineering. That's usually what I call it. It's really, I mean,
I
you
love
are
that.
doing a lot of like graph paper
Yeah.
measurements, angles. It is all the things that you learned in school, but it's applied in a creative pursuit. And so I like that. I like the approachability of what you said. I am scared of Y seams and curves, and it detracts me from buying patterns, because that's something that I know I can find a YouTube video and there's people that'll teach me how to do that, but I don't enjoy that part of quilting. That's not something that I find joy in. I like challenging myself, but I don't want something that's so complex that I feel like I'm set up to fail from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's good to learn how to do new skills, and it's good to try a Y seam, make a quilt with them, and then I've done that. I never have to do that again. You know,
Yes,
I can do it if I need to, but I don't want to do it, so I'm not going to. So,
exactly.
you know, I mean, there's no rule with quilting that you have to learn how to do every single type of skill. Um, you know, you do what you want to do, and then work from there. Yeah, I studied in college biology and math, and so the math part about quilting is, you know, it's not a challenge for me. You know, of course, figuring out fabric requirements sometimes will give me a headache because it's a lot of thinking, but I
Mhm.
enjoy that part. And yeah, I really like that. I love that, what you said about textile engineering. Is that
Textile engineering, yeah. And for me, I'm challenged to use the fabric as efficiently as possible, right? So if I'm told to cut a certain shape, like, can I do more with the fabric, or do I cut the width, and which width do I cut to maximize the shape? I'm so competitive. Like, I'm like, how can I cut the least amount of fabric to get the best possible outcome? So
Yeah, I like that too. And I try to be very fabric efficient in my patterns, and it's not always practical, which is why I also try to provide tutorials for using scraps, because
mhm,
as much as I would love to just use every inch of every fat quarter or whatever, it's not always going to work. But I do the same thing. I like to be very efficient, and I also like to take, if I'm going to make somebody else's pattern, I like to do it totally different than what they said. Not the directions, but maybe mix up the colors or make it rainbowy, or, you know, just put my own spin on it. And I try to make my patterns accessible to that type of quilting too, because I know some people like to just follow exactly what you say, but some people want to take creative liberties with that. And that's hard to write into a pattern, because, you know, all of a sudden you have a pattern that's like a million pages long, and it would cost so much to print that it wouldn't be worthwhile. So
right.
I think that's a challenging thing.
So how do you balance that when you're designing a pattern? Because so I am one of those people, when I see a pattern, I like the picture on the cover. But if I see your pattern in a shop a year from now, I probably can't get those fabrics. So how do you help someone like me guide me to a fabric that I can find in the quilt shop that day?
Yeah, that is definitely one of the most tricky things. And I struggled with that more when I was first starting. And so I'm kind of going back and redoing some older patterns to be a little bit more accessible. So I think one of the things that you can do as a quilter is just keep making your patterns, and then sharing the fabrics that you use, so people will feel like, and also it can be more, like if a pattern is on the cover that uses solids, it doesn't feel dated as quickly. But I'm generally a prints person, so I don't have a ton of solids on my quilt covers. But yeah, it's hard when people say, you know, where do I get this fabric? And I'm like, actually, 2 years ago, you know,
Yes.
I could have found that, but now I don't think you could find that anymore. So that is a tricky thing with fabric. Um,
Yeah, it is. I mean, when I would travel to quilt shows for cotton cuts, we had this quilt. It was a star, and it had the most beautiful neutral fabrics. And people would be like, "What's that fabric?" I was like, "That's like 4 years ago. Like, it doesn't exist anymore." So sorry about
I know. Yeah. Sometimes, like, I recently used a fabric for a backing, and a couple people were like, "Where do I get that?" And I'm like, "I have had that for about 10 years. So good luck."
I know. My mom is the same way. She's had a stash since, like, we've been sewing since I was very young, and she'll put backing on, and people be like, "Where'd you get that?" She's like, Arizona, like circa 1982. Like, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I know that is
Yeah.
tricky. The change in fabric collections that are available is so quick, which is nice because you love to have new stuff, but at the same time, it goes so
Yes.
quickly.
Yes, agreed. So how are you inspired, Erica? Where do you get inspiration from for your designs, for your pattern selections, for your colors?
So, I try to be very current on what other people are making, and I follow a lot of people just to kind of see what styles people are interested in. But to me, the main thing that I do is that I try to work on designing patterns almost every day. So just for like 10 or 15 minutes. And breaking it down into the smaller time periods really helps me kind of process what I'm thinking, and it makes it a lot less frustrating. Because if I am trying to, like, if a fabric company comes to me and says, like, can you design a quilt that will work with these fabrics, and they give me like a couple days, that's really frustrating to me because my brain doesn't work that way. So I try to keep a ongoing folder with ideas in it so that if I get contacted with a question like that, I can plug those fabrics in to the quilt, and that whole long-term process works a lot better for me. And also, I do think I like to be inspired by the fabrics. So when I'm designing a pattern, even if I'm not going to use fabrics, the fabrics that the digital files that I have, I will mock the quilt up in some of my favorite collections because they're inspiring just to work with them. So that's really helpful for me. So much creativity in fabric right now that it's just amazing.
Now, are you a paper notebook person, like graph paper? Do you start by hand or do you go straight to a computer?
I do some of both, but mostly on the computer, just because I'm not a neat person. I am a very messy desk person, and so things get lost. It's much easier to organize my ideas in a folder on my computer than try to locate my notebook where I sketch something down. But I do have a graph paper notebook, and I do use it for ideas. I just don't take the idea very far on the graph paper because the computer is faster. And
So what's your go-to software program? What do you find the easiest
I
to use?
use Electric Quilt. So
Okay,
when I'm
good.
coming up with ideas, so I have EQ8 on my computer. And so I use that for mock-ups. But then when I am making the graphics for my pattern, I use a program I have an iPad Pro, and it's called Affinity Designer. It's kind of like a Adobe Illustrator, but it's not as complicated. It can't do as much stuff, but it does everything I need it to do. I don't need everything Illustrator can do, because it can do everything.
Right.
And so it works really well for me. And I like having on the iPad. So, if my kids have something, I just take the iPad with me and then I can work on it while they're doing whatever they're doing.
Awesome. So you mentioned you like prints over solids. Who are
Mhm.
some of your favorite fabric designers? Who are you most inspired by?
So I love Denise Schmidt. So I'm so glad she is making fabric again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. So, and part of that is that she's one of the first designers that I ever sewed with. I bought her fabric when I first started quilting. It's kind of shortly after I started is when she started doing her fabric through Joann's. And so I loved her picnics and fairgrounds fabric, and that was a lot of fun. So I loved Lizzie House. She's not making fabric anymore, but I still have a lot of
Oh
her
my gosh,
fabric.
yeah.
Yeah,
There was a Lizzie House phase where that was everywhere. Yes.
oh yeah, and she just has some colors that nobody else used that are really usable. And so I wish she was still making fabric, but I'll hoard what I have. And then I'm a huge fan of Ruby Star Society. All of their fabrics are fun and new. And Maureen Cracknell for
Yes.
Art Gallery.
For Art Gallery. Yes.
Yeah, I love that she does a lot with purple. Because that's my favorite, and I feel like it's the color I can hardly find. And yeah, that's off the top of my head. Those are my favorites.
Very good. So you mentioned Ruby Star. So they do a lot of graphic prints, right? And I know a lot of our members buy the graphic prints and then are afraid to cut into them. And so how have you found is kind of the best way to get past that, to where you move the fabric into usable? Because those fabrics, they're so cute. They've got the cutest little motifs on them. And I want to look at the motif. I don't want to cut it
You
apart.
don't
So how
want
do
to
you
cut
get people, how do you help people get past that?
All right, let me show you a couple quilts.
Okay.
So I have a couple quilts here, and these both are made with Ruby Star fabrics. So this is my most recent pattern. It's called the Virginia quilt. And even though this is not one with a lot of cutesy graphic fits, I wanted to really see the fabric. So I try to write patterns that really show fabric off. And then this is actually my most popular pattern.
Oh yeah, no, I see the Ruby Star right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And so this one is one I knew I didn't want to cut up the fabric on. Like, I love the birds. So this pattern doesn't use any Y seams. And it really shows off the fabrics. You just, the places where there are seams, there are some kind of tricks to hide where they are, in fabric choice. So my answer to that would just be to use patterns that don't cut your fabric into tiny pieces. That's my favorite type of thing, because I also really like quick quilts. So I don't, as fun as it is to spend tons of time piecing little pieces, I do like to do that sometimes. But for the most part, I like a quick quilt that I can just put together. And, this quilt in the background is my Judy quilt pattern. I'm working on something for art gallery.
Oh, sure.
That, and I can make that pattern, that quilt, in like 5 hours, including cutting time. And so that's my favorite type of project. I see my fabric and I can put it together quickly, and it's just fun because it's not so long. You're not working with it so long that you start to get annoyed with it. You just enjoy the fabric and just the process of making it.
Oh my God, Erica, you've inspired me. So I am, I have so many of those patterns where it's teeny tiny little pieces. And every year I do the Bonnie Hunter mystery quilt along, which is like 5,000 pieces in a quilt top. And I mean, it's great for scraps, but if you have big, bold graphic fabric, like the big designers are putting out, it's really hard to come up with an idea to do it. But the fact that you have big patterns that can be put together quickly, that hits a lot of motivations, because then, quilters can take it from fabric to finished product very quickly. That's motivating.
Yeah, and it's very satisfying too, especially like I felt being stuck at home this past year, and however long it's been now. It's been so nice to just say, like, today I want to make a quilt, and I just sit down. My kids are doing their schoolwork and I just make a quilt, and I feel like, my laundry didn't get done, but I made something. And it's a lot of satisfaction. I think it's really, that's one of the best parts about quilting is being able to enjoy the work you put into it for a long time.
So what do you do with all the quilts you make? So someone asked my mom this question the other day, because she came in with like 3 quilts she had made in a week, and they're like, so what do you do with them? So Erica, what do you do with all these quilts that you're making?
Well, I want to know what your mom said. What'd your mom say?
Oh, so she has said she gives them away. She does a lot for charity and for donations. And then she said, this was a surprise to me. So she has a tub in her basement that has my name on it, everyone on my family, my brother, everyone in his family. And she's just going to store these quilts. And one day she's just going to show up with a tub that has our name on it, and we're just going to get a whole bunch of quilts all at once. And I was like, I don't know if that's the right answer, but it's an answer, right? So she's making to fill a tub that she will then transfer to us at some point in the future.
That's awesome. And I don't think there really is a right answer. So I think, I've done different things. I used to donate all of the quilts that I made, usually to Project Linus. That was when we were living in Southern California. And I at some point I was like, I do want to still donate quilts, and I do. But I also would like them to go to other people who want to buy them. So what I've done for the past couple of years is twice a year or so I'll have a sale, and I've done it on Instagram or in my shop, and it's just kind of a sample sale. So I don't charge what the retail value of the quilt is worth. I kind of put it at a lower price point, because I just want, I don't want the quilts to be just sitting in my house unused. I'd like them to go to people who will appreciate and use them. It's been fun because childhood friends of mine have bought some, and, just people that I haven't heard from in a long time that I didn't even realize followed me on Instagram have bought some of the quilts. So that's been kind of a fun way. It's also been kind of a stressful way to deal with it. I don't know if I'm going to keep doing it that way. But I do, like, all my siblings have quilts. All my nieces and nephews have quilts. My kids have lots. And so I do give a lot away. And it's really nice to just, like, I always give quilts to my kids' teachers. And it's nice to just have them on hand. Let's say, like, someone is going through a hard time, I have something that I can give them. And I used to make a lot of baby quilts because I had a lot of friends having babies, but now I'm not that young anymore. And so most of my friends are done having babies. So I don't make a lot of baby quilts anymore, but I've missed it. So I'm trying to make more baby quilts because they are fun.
Yeah, I feel that too. There was a point in time where my brother was constantly calling me. I'd be like, oh my God, I got to a baby shower. I got to go to a baby shower. And I'm like, I'm out of that phase of life now. Like, it feels kind of sad. Like grab a charm pack, make a quilt in a weekend, right?
Yeah, I know. I do too. And I feel like, because I'm the oldest of 5 kids, none of my siblings have any children. I'm like, guys, I got to make your baby quilts. Have some kids.
We're the same. My husband's sister's fine. She's having her second, but my brother has none. And I'm like, come on, like, I'm getting past the point of where baby quilts are easy to make. Like, let's start moving this along, people.
I know. I'm ready for those nieces and nephews. Luckily, my husband's family has a lot. So
exactly. Good. All right. So tell us, Erica, what's your favorite type of thread? What do you like to sew with the most? What is the easiest for you to create with?
So I have about 50 of these sitting in my sewing room. So I have the one on my desk. I always use Aurifil cones, 50 weight. And this is not the color I normally use. I actually just bought this. I don't know why. But I like 2021, which is white, and 2024, which is like natural white. Or maybe I'm mixing those up. And 2600, which is like the silver gray. That's pretty much, I use those 100% of the time. I don't really use a lot of others. And occasionally I'll say, let's do something fun on this quilt, and I'll do like a light pink, or, you know, I like it to blend, but I'm not very adventurous.
I'm the same way. I'm a white cotton right down the middle. In our mystery quilters group, people always ask, what color do you piece with? And someone was like, well, I'm doing this colorway, so I think I should piece it with gray. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the thing. Like, people actually piece without white thread. It was a game changer for me that you could piece with not white thread.
Yeah, no, I do. That's what I have on my machine right now. So.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. A quilt. So yeah, no, it's just nice because then I have like 10 cones of each color just on standby, and I never have to stress about running out. And I love Aurifil. It's great, and I love the cone. My machine doesn't need to be.
I was going to say, because it looks like a serger, but that's a regular sewing machine.
Yeah, it's a Janome Memory Craft 6600. Yeah, I love my machine so much.
Very awesome. All right. So I sent you this question ahead of time. What do you like to do while you sew? Are you a podcaster? Are you a radio? Are you a Netflix binger? Or are you just in your zone?
So for a long time, I was a Netflix binger, and I feel like I watched literally every single thing that came out because I just would burn through things so fast. And then I kind of went through a podcast phase, and that turned into an audiobook. And now I am audiobooks all the time. I haven't watched TV in over a year, like anything. Oh, actually, I'm watching the Great British Baking Show or whatever with my kids.
Oh, yes.
We used to watch like an episode or 2 a week. But other than that, I haven't watched while I was sewing in a long time. So I used to use through my library, I get audiobooks, and I go through one a day, one every 2 days, a lot.
So tell us, so that's going to beg the follow-up question. What book did you just finish?
Oh, I just finished, I don't even remember. A book called We Can't Keep Meeting Like This. It's like I don't know if it's YA. I don't think it's YA, but it's a cute little romantic comedy type thing. I listen to fluff. I don't listen to anything.
Oh, I'm the same. I don't have very much time to read, so I'm like, it needs to be very light and brainless and just something I can plow through pretty quickly.
Yeah. I try to throw in something serious like once a month, some important thing, but it's hard. I have a hard time with nonfiction. So
yeah, same here.
I can just fly through.
Yep. No, I feel that. All right. So last question for me, and then we'll see if anyone in the Facebook Live has questions for you.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite quilting snack? When you're binging at your sewing machine and you're listening to your audiobook, what's your favorite snack?
You know, I'm not really a snacker. So,
Okay.
so I love chocolate covered almonds. That's probably my favorite.
Chocolate covered
Yeah,
almonds.
I don't really, I bring my meals and eat them at my desk usually. Like I'll eat breakfast and lunch at my desk, but I don't really snack in here. So sorry, that's not exciting. I'm
No,
not like
no,
one
no,
of
no.
those quilters that hides M&Ms in their machine.
Yes, so that is me. I am a peanut M&M person.
I do love M&Ms. I just don't trust myself with them in my sewing room because
Right.
once I start, you know, I develop a habit of, like I had this habit in college. Whenever I took a test, I would bring chocolate covered raisins and I would eat them during the test. So I got to the point where I couldn't focus unless I was eating chocolate covered raisins. So I don't want to get to the point where I can't sew if I'm not eating M&Ms. You know?
Oh, that is fantastic. All right, so let me take a look over and see if there's anyone in the live that has a question or a comment. So we've had some people pop on and talk about how they like quick and easy quilts. That's 2 thumbs up from people in the audience. They like quick and easy. There is about like a 20-second lag. So when I say, hey, are there any questions in the Facebook Live, it's going to be a little bit before someone does pop over and
Okay,
ask.
no problem.
Yeah, so let me see, do I have other questions for you? Oh, I did want to, while we're waiting for folks to pop in their question into the chat box, I did want to share the actual quilts that Erica has put for our members. And so I'm hoping everyone on the Facebook Live can see this. And so these are the quilts that our members can log into the website and actually download one free PDF. Now, I know that we tell our members it's free. We actually pay Erica for her work. We believe in compensating designers appropriately for what they do. But it's interesting because when we had your card in the shop and we were looking at your patterns, it was pretty split as to our favorites. Like normally there's like, hey, these are the 1 or 2 that people really like, but we had strong opinions. And I put these 2 up first because these are the ones that were most heavily gravitated to by the men that work for me. And so they love these quilts. I think they like the simplicity in the design. It doesn't feel very girly and floral, and they like the geometry with those too.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
if I look at my like who follows me on Instagram, it's really interesting because it's like 98% women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like the rest of them are my cousins, the men. So
yeah.
and my brother and my husband.
Well, and so we've been doing a ton of statistical work. And so Instagram actually has more male users than female users in general.
Really?
And the biggest number of users are in the 18 to 34 category. And like the male users in that age group are really high. And I'm like, I must be in the wrong circles because that is not what I see on Instagram
I
at
know,
all.
me either. Not at
Right.
all.
All right, and then these are the other 3 patterns that are out there. And Erica, I love all of these. I'm a rainbow person, and so these are my jam. Yes, and you have the ombre in the picture on the left, and that is just, I love all that.
Yeah, that was really fun to work with.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's see here. So we have a question from Amy Kirkemeyer on the group, and she is asking, I have lost it. Hold on 1 second. Do you pick fabrics after you design a quilt, or do the fabrics inspire your designs?
So some of both. Sometimes the fabrics will inspire the design, but then I don't actually use those fabrics to make the quilt. And one thing I do before I even consider doing something as a pattern is I mock that quilt up with several different collections, because sometimes an idea will work for like a really limited fabric combination or like just a couple of different collections, and I don't want to write a pattern that won't work with lots of collections. So that is a really useful thing, is that even if I'm never going to make all these different varieties, is that I try them and just see how it works with different styles of fabric, solids, prints, large scale, small scale. And then also in the pattern I'll include like a little blurb about what type of things will work best and will help make the quilt successful.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of quilts that are like cat fabric on cat designs, or a lot of fabrics that are designed for a specific pattern. And like we said when we first started, like that's a turnoff to me because that pattern doesn't have legs in a year when I can't get that fabric. Or if I buy it for the quilts and I make a mistake and then I'm short in a year, it's almost impossible to find that gap filler. So
I know.
yeah, I think there's a give and a take. I like it both ways, but you're absolutely right. If you want longevity in the patterns, it has to be generic enough.
Yeah, I think so. And there's definitely a place for those more specialized type of quilts where that works with a specific thing. And I don't always think when I'm writing a pattern, like I don't want every pattern to appeal to every person. It's great to have a pattern with a lot of appeal, but I want to write patterns that work for different types of people too. So maybe I'll write a pattern and I'll say, you know what, this is probably not going to be anywhere near my best-selling pattern, but I think it's an important one to have in my shop, and so I'll still write the pattern for that.
Plus, I mean, you have to create to what sings to you, right? I mean, what fits with you, what fits with your aesthetic, and what you're gonna like the most. Okay, so that's the only questions that have been submitted into the shop. I have no doubt people are going to watch us afterwards and have tons of questions, and I will siphon to you what I can't, what we, if we need to bring you back into the conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Erica. It has been an absolute lovely chat with you.
I had a really good time. Thank you.
Thank you.